Hello. In this presentation, I'm going to focus on micronutrients. And these are vitamins and minerals that you only need in small amounts, hence the micro. So it's going to be a little lecture-y, more so than normal. Be sure to take some notes, and I will also give you some additional resources with reading about these different micronutrients and micronutrients in general and why they're so important. Let's start off by reviewing a couple important terms that were introduced a week or two ago. First of all, overnutrition and undernutrition are both problems. They're opposite problems. So overnutrition means people are getting too many calories every day, which can lead to obesity. Undernutrition means people are going hungry. They're not getting enough calories every day. So this is a huge problem. About 1 out of every 10 people are undernourished, and about 45% of deaths among children under 5 are linked to undernutrition. We'll take a look at overnutrition and see why that is a problem as well. Now, malnutrition can actually be coupled with both overnutrition and undernutrition, or can be its own thing. So malnutrition means that somebody isn't getting the correct amount of nutrients or types of nutrients. So you can think of it as them having an unbalanced diet where they're not getting all of the both micronutrients and macronutrients that they need. The consequences, which you'll be studying next week, are oftentimes not immediately apparent. It can be really delayed. And so this is sometimes called hidden hunger. Someone might be getting the right number of calories or even too many calories, but they may have things start going wrong with their bodies that are related to the actual nutrients in those calories that they are consuming. So interestingly, 1 out of 3 people around the world are malnourished. An example here of some of the really high rate diseases that are associated with malnutrition, anemia, which is a lack of iron, affects 43% of children 5 years of age and 38% of pregnant women globally. Pregnant women oftentimes are given iron supplements to help with that. And 1 in 3 preschool age children and 1 in 6 pregnant women are vitamin A deficient. Finally, about 2 billion people have insufficient iron intake. This video doesn't have any audio, just watch and pay attention to the trend.
Fact or fiction? The percentage of adults in the U.S. who are obese has leveled off in the last several years. Answer: fiction. According to the most recent data, 4 in 10 adults aged 20 and over are obese, compared to 3 in 10 a decade and a half ago.
We'll take a look at overnutrition and undernutrition in some upcoming lessons, but today I want to really focus on micronutrients, which can lead to malnutrition. So these we only need in very, very small amounts, less than 1 gram per day. And to give you an idea of what that means, for macronutrients, our carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, we actually need 60 to 200 grams per day. So the amount of micronutrients we need is much, much, much smaller. And because of that, we actually use different units to measure them. Oftentimes we're using milligrams and micrograms. So a milligram is 1/1000th of a gram. A microgram is 1/1000th of a milligram. So you can think of it as like a millionth of a gram. These carry no energy, so we don't eat them or consume them for energy like we do with the macronutrients. Instead, we're getting them for just cell function and other things that need to happen in our bodies. So to compare and contrast minerals and vitamins a little bit, minerals have very, very simple structure. So they're often just elements or are elements like iron, iodine, calcium. So it's a single atom in many cases. And there are different types of minerals. Some are major, some are trace, just depending on the amount that we need on a day-to-day or weekly basis. These are all inorganic, meaning we don't derive them from living things. They don't have carbon, oxygen, hydrogen in them. Essentially, they don't have carbon. And mostly are coming, again, from non-living matter. Vitamins, on the other hand, have a much, much more complex structure if we're thinking of the chemical structure. There are two categories. They can be water or fat soluble, and that's actually a little bit important. It determines how we can best ingest them and absorb them, and then what our body does with them. Water-soluble vitamins, if you have too much of it, you actually just urinate them out in that watery urine. Fat-soluble vitamins, they're soluble, they dissolve in fat, and we actually store them in our fat as well. So if you have too much of a fat-soluble vitamin, you actually store it in your organs in that fat. Vitamins are organic, so they do contain carbon and hydrogen, and they are mostly coming from living matter, from living organisms. Let's focus on vitamins first. Vitamins are needed for growth and maintaining general health. They are an essential component of the diet. That means that for most vitamins, our body isn't producing them. We actually need to get them from our foods. Deficiencies lead to very specific diseases. So deficiency in vitamin D is going to have a different effect or different disease than a deficiency in, say, vitamin B12. There are 13 groups of compounds that are recognized as vitamins. Some have like one general name that are actually a group of related compounds called vitamins. So a good example of this is actually vitamin E. It's actually a group of compounds that we just put under this umbrella term of vitamin E. Provitamins are compounds that the body can actually convert into vitamins. So carotenoid is a provitamin that we can get from our food, things like carrots, and our body is then actually able to metabolize that carotenoid and convert it into vitamin A. So, we still have to get that provitamin from our food, even though our body's able to make vitamin A.
A brief history of vitamins. Long ago, we lived in trees. We ate our fruit. We picked our fleas. But then we left. We sailed the seas and soon succumbed to strange disease. Let's wind our way down to the Nile, where some of us endure a trial. Whenever daylight turns to night, we cannot see. We lose our sight. While some of us rely on prayer, some others turn to trial and error. A bit of liver, they surmise, applied directly to the eyes, release a blind man from his plight, returning back to him his sight. Let's skip ahead some centuries and turn the globe a few degrees. Right now, we're sailors in Japan, We're doing everything we can to figure out exactly why we're feeling, less than spry. Turns out we need some good advice on how to best prepare our rice. By switching it from white to brown, we turn our energy around. Meanwhile, far away from shore, some more seasickness is in store. With yellow eyes and spotty skin, our teeth are slowly rotting in. However, when we start to swill, we notice that we feel less ill. So grog's the answer, we declare, and swiftly drink away our cares. We didn't know it at the time. The thing that saved us was the lime, a bit of which we'd squeeze into that wretched tasting pirate's brew. Soon after that, a revolution that darkens doorways with pollution and chokes our skies with clouds so thick our children wither, pale and sick. Their brittle bones will not withstand the burdens of this shadowland until we find the perfect foil, a daily dose of liver oil. And that was how we beat the gloom. We took our sunlight with a spoon. Today, we've cracked the mystery. Cod liver oil, it's full of D. You can't spell brown rice without B. And lime is packed with loads of C. So raise your glasses, swill your swill. Go slap some livers on the grill. Unless, of course, that makes you ill, in which case we suggest a pill. Problem solved? Well, not so fast. Sometimes the past is not the past. And vitamin deficiency is hardly ancient history.
That was a light-hearted version of the history of vitamins. Here's the real history of vitamins. So in the late 1800s, food was viewed as a source of protein, carbohydrates, minerals, water, maybe fat, and energy only. Scientists were discovering that with adequate diet, it was possible to cure a lot of diseases such as scurvy, rickets, beriberi, and pellagra, which some of those you will be investigating next week. In 1911, Casimir Funk, a Polish biochemist, actually isolated the molecule that prevents beriberi, and he found that it consisted of a nitrogen-containing compound called an amine. So he called what he found vital amines, and that actually is how we came up with the term vitamins. So vitamins were named mostly in the order they were discovered. If you've ever wondered why things are called like vitamin A, vitamin B, vitamin C, it doesn't really stand for anything. Again, it was just the order that those different compounds were discovered. And then a lot of them ended up being a mixture of unrelated vitamins. The B vitamins are actually structurally very different. They just got put under this umbrella of B vitamins based on when they were discovered. I mentioned before that there are two main types of vitamins, the fat-soluble and the water-soluble vitamins. So you can see here which vitamins are fat-soluble and which are water-soluble. The fat-soluble are more stable to heat. So if you're cooking foods, they're less likely to kind of degrade. The water-soluble vitamins I mentioned before, they're poorly retained except for B12. So you tend to urinate them out, and so you need them every day. The fat-soluble vitamins are going to be absorbed with fats in foods. Fish has a lot of fat that can help us absorb particular fat-soluble vitamins, and these are stored in our fatty tissues as well as the liver. Deficiencies develop really slowly because you do store fat, and within those fat stores, you're storing those fat-soluble vitamins. And because of that, it's actually okay to eat them only occasionally. You don't need them every day, and they can actually be toxic at high amounts. Again, because you're storing them, you don't just urinate out the excess. So vitamin A is an important fat-soluble vitamin, and in high levels, so more than 1,500 micrograms per day, it can actually be toxic and may cause bone damage, but it is needed for dim light vision, healthy skin and eyes, resistance to infection, and retinol can actually, or vitamin A, can be obtained in two forms. So retinol, which comes from animal sources, and then carotenoids or beta carotene, which are those provitamins, which can come from plant sources, and then the body actually makes the retinol. It's found in liver and milk. It can also be produced from those beta carotene that are in things like dark leafy green vegetables, carrots, and other orange colored fruits. Pregnant women actually shouldn't consume liver or liver pate because high levels of retinol might be present, and excess retinol during pregnancy can lead to birth defects. Vitamin D is needed for the absorption of calcium from food to keep bones and teeth healthy, and a lack of vitamin D can cause rickets in children, and this is where leg bones become weakened and bent. And there's a related condition called osteomalacia that can occur in adults. Poor vitamin D status has also been linked to increased falls in elderly people, which is thought to be linked to an adverse effect on muscles. We get most of our vitamin D actually from sunlight on our skin during the summer months. For those of us in the Seattle area, this can be a challenge even in the summer because we don't get nearly as much sunshine, and so it is important to try to get some through your diet or even supplements. So dietary sources include oily fish, meats, eggs. A lot of breakfast cereals and juices are actually fortified with vitamin D, meaning the vitamins added to it. Now, some of the water-soluble vitamins, the B vitamins, where we have a ton of them, they're not actually that closely related, and they each have a very specific function in the body. So you can see which the major ones, and some of them have other names. So vitamin B1 is also called thiamine, vitamin B3, niacin. So you can see some of those names. They are identified by multiple names, I guess. So thiamine, or vitamin B1, it's required to release energy from carbohydrates. So carbohydrates are a super important source. It's our body's #1 source of energy. So we need it for that chemical process to break it down. It's also involved in the normal function of the nervous system. Sources, you can see lots of good stuff: whole grains, nuts, pork, fruits and vegetables, and fortified breakfast cereals. Riboflavin is another B vitamin, and it's required to release energy from proteins, carbohydrates, and fats. It's also used to transport iron in the body. So, it's an important one for women especially. And you can see what kinds of foods you can find riboflavin in. Deficiency of riboflavin is characterized by dryness and cracking of the skin around the mouth and nose, and actually a painful tongue that can be red and dry. Niacin is another B vitamin required for the release of energy from food. So you can see a trend here with those B vitamins. It's also required for the normal function of the skin, mucous membranes, and nervous system. And it's found in a lot of the same types of foods as riboflavin, which we just saw. And deficiency in niacin is characterized by sun-sensitive skin, which is called pellagra. B12 is needed for the production of energy again, formation of red blood cells, normal function of the immune system and nervous system, and normal psychological function. Now, this is a really interesting one. It's interesting for me, especially I'm vegan, and so the source of vitamin B12 pretty much nowadays includes foods with animal origins or fortification of food. So really, if you're just eating foods that aren't fortified, you can really only get B12 from meat, fish, milk, eggs, cheese. Yeast extract does have some B12, and then a lot of fortified foods like cereals will have B12. Dietary deficiency of B12 is really rare in young people. Except for in vegans. Blood levels of B12 can be low because of poor absorption, especially in older people. And it's a really serious condition. Severe vitamin B12 deficiency can result in a type of anemia where red blood cells are enlarged. It can also result in peripheral nerve damage, like in the legs. And interestingly, it's a big problem. I also have goats at home. So in livestock, especially goats can get B12 deficiency, and it actually gives them a lot of neurological damage. So it's something that's pretty scary. So I actually take B12 supplements, and a lot of other vegans do. And if you don't eat much animal-based foods, it's a really good idea. Vitamin C, you've all heard of, I'm sure. It's actually needed to make collagen, which is a connective tissue, and it's required for structure and function of the skin, cartilage, and bone. It's also a really important nutrient for healing cuts and wounds. You probably know this already. It's found in citrus fruits, also berries, but you might not have known it's also in a lot of other types of vegetables. Green leafy vegetables, peppers, tomatoes, potatoes are good examples. And vitamin C can help with the absorption of iron. So, if you are eating something high in iron or you take an iron supplement, it's actually a good idea to eat that with something that's also high in vitamin C. And severe deficiency of vitamin C can cause scurvy, which is characterized by the bleeding of gums and poor wound healing. It's also associated with fatigue, weakness, aching of joints and muscles. And it's what sailors used to get because they'd be on the water and in their boats for so long and not have access to fresh fruits and vegetables. It's actually kind of a myth that vitamin C helps much with immune system. Unless you are like an elite athlete, then it does provide minimal help, but otherwise there's really not much evidence that it is that helpful. So if you have a cold, it's good to get fluids. It's always good to eat fresh fruits and vegetables, but the vitamin C itself may not be helping you that much. Now moving on to some minerals. They're present in pretty much all foods except for vegetable oils and table sugar. I thought that was really, really interesting. So you're almost always getting minerals when you're eating. You probably don't just eat vegetable oil on its own or spoonfuls of sugar. So 21 out of the 118 elements are essential compounds of the diet. And that does not include carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, and nitrogen, which are in pretty much every organic molecule. So if we exclude those, we're left with 17 dietary minerals. So things that we have to consume through our foods. These are inorganic molecules. So major minerals we need in quantities of at least 5 grams or actually we find at least 5 grams of that mineral in our body. So it's not what we have to consume, it's what's actually stored in our body. And those are calcium, phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, sodium, chloride, and magnesium. And then trace minerals we only find in very, very small amounts in our body. So iron, zinc, copper, manganese, molybdenum, I can't say that, molybdenum, fluoride, cobalt, iodine, selenium, and chromium. Many of these can actually be toxic if taken in excess. So even those major minerals, the amount that we need and the amount that we store in our body is a much, much smaller scale than what we need for macronutrients like carbohydrates. Minerals are actually bound to molecules in food. So, something like iron's not the best example, but something like calcium, you may not just be, eating or consuming pure calcium. It's actually bound to something else, and that can limit how well we absorb it, so how bioavailable it is to us. Low bioavailability can lead to deficiencies even if the mineral intake meets the recommended amount. So maybe you're eating foods that are high in calcium, but the way that calcium, the molecules that it's part of, it's not easy for us to gain access to. Plant foods tend to have lower bioavailability than animal foods, but it does depend on the chemical form of the nutrient. One thing that kind of contributes to this is a lot of plant foods have a lot of negatively charged compounds, and those negatively charged compounds tightly bind to cations, these positively charged atoms like calcium, like iron, like zinc. And so it's really hard to break those cations, those positive ions, from those negatively charged compounds so our bodies can use them. Processing food can also really limit bioavailability. So we're just going to go over a couple of the minerals and mostly the major minerals. So calcium, you probably know a lot about, especially as women. It's something that we think about or should think about. The body actually contains more calcium than any other mineral, and it's essential for a lot of different things. So it helps us maintain our bones and teeth, which you probably knew about. You might not have known, though, that it also helps with blood clotting and normal muscle function. So milk and cheese and dairy products are a really good source of calcium in the diet, but it's also provided by non-animal products such as broccoli, cabbage, fortified soy products. So if you drink like soy milk, a lot of those have calcium added to it. And fish, if you're eating fish with a bone, so really small fish like sardines and canned salmon oftentimes have little bones in them, and that's a great source of calcium. The skeleton actually contains about 99% of the body's calcium, with about 1 kilogram present in adult bones. So that's pretty significant. And the calcium level in blood is carefully regulated by hormones, including vitamin D, to keep it within narrow limits. So calcium balance can be maintained at different levels of calcium intake, but it is really important that you're also taking or, getting enough vitamin D so you can sort of maintain that balance of the amount that you need. Iron, as you probably know, is essential for the formation of hemoglobin in your red blood cells. And hemoglobin is the protein that actually carries the oxygen through your body. It's also required for normal metabolism and removing some waste substances from your body. Sources of iron, people tend to know about red meat. Also, liver is a really good source of iron. There are also plant sources of iron, such as nuts and dried fruits, whole grains and beans, and of course, dark green leafy vegetables. Now, Animal sources of iron have heme iron. It's a form of iron, and this is found in meat, poultry, and fish. It's easier for your body to absorb than non-heme iron, which is found in plant sources. Non-heme iron, though, can be more easily absorbed if it's consumed along with vitamin C. So like fruit juice, green leafy vegetables, of course, are great. Great things a great way to get iron and your vitamin C. Now, interestingly, some foods like coffee, milk, and tea can actually hinder iron absorption if you eat them at the same time as iron-rich foods. So that is just something to think about, especially if you struggle at all with iron deficiency. Iron in the diet, if you don't get enough, it means that the amount of iron you're storing in your body will actually run out. You need iron, and that again is really, really important, especially for healthy red blood cells, or just to make more red blood cells. So if you don't have enough iron, you're not producing enough red blood cells, and that can lead to anemia. And anemia is characterized by fatigue, breathlessness, feeling really tired because, again, your body's just not getting enough oxygen. Women and teenage girls need more iron than men of the same age because of menstruation. So we're having to make more red blood cells. And more than 2 billion people worldwide suffer from iron deficiency anemia. So it is actually one of the most common nutritional deficiencies, and it's not something that only occurs in the developing world. Sodium. Sodium gets a bad rap, but sodium is actually found in all of our cells and body fluids. We need it for regulating the amount of water and other substances in the body. So it's not only a bad thing. Most raw foods contain only very small amounts of sodium chloride, which is salt. But salt is often added during processing, preparation. So think about when you're cooking, I add salt to everything. And when we're serving foods, about 20% of the salt we need is added at home during cooking and at the table. But if you're buying a lot of processed foods, check out the labels. Sometimes you might be shocked at the amount of sodium that is added. High sodium intake is considered to be one of the risk factors for high blood pressure, and that can lead to heart disease and stroke. So, that tends to be the problem. I don't know if I've ever heard of anyone not getting enough sodium. It usually is that people are getting too much. So it's recommended that adults have a maximum of 6 grams of salt per day.
or fiction? The percentage of adults in the U.S. who are obese has leveled off in the last several years. Answer: fiction. According to the most recent data, 4 in 10 adults aged 20 and over are obese, compared to 3 in 10 a decade and a half ago.